Well, so today's topic is Arnold as a critic. Okay, so what we are going to discuss is we'll discuss Arnold as a critic in general. Then we'll talk about two works which are in your syllabus: the study of poetry and especially touchstone method, and what does he say about Wordsworth and Shelley. Then the second work is Culture and Anarchy, though we will talk about all the chapters a little bit, but the important ones are Sweetness and Light, and then Hellenism and Hebraism. So he is known as culture critic. A culture critic is the one who writes about a given culture, usually as a whole. Okay. So his period can be divided, period as a literary critic can be divided into three phases. He began to write about criticism at the age of 31, and then throughout his life, around 33 years, he devoted his genius for criticism, not only literary criticism. So the first page begins with preface to the 1853 edition of his poems, and it ends with Essays and Criticism that came in 1865. Okay. The second phase is middle period, which overlaps with the first and third phases. So it is characterized by social, political, and religious writing, and it began in 1860 and ended in 1875. And then the third phase begins with his edition on Wordsworth and Byron's poetry, and this ends with the second series of Essays in Criticism. The first series of Essays in Criticism came in 1865, the second came in 1888, and the study of Culture and Anarchy is the first essay of the second series of Essays in Criticism. So if we talk about Arnold as a critic, so he has written on varied areas. He had written on literature, society, journalism, and on religion. Okay, so on all these areas he has given his critical views. Journalistic criticism, I repeated that this is not in your syllabus, but this is important because he coined the phrase new journalism. Okay, so new journalism to define an entire genre of newspaper history. Especially in this work, he attacks Lord Northcliffe's turn of the century press empire and the second Pall Mall Gazette editor W.T. Stead. Okay. So he made a very daring statement here. The PMG, whatever may be its merit, is fast ceasing to be literature. In one of the examinations, I do not remember that, there was a question, what is the full form of PMG, which Arnold uses in his literary criticism. So it is Pall Mall Gazette. Then if you talk about religious criticism, he has written two important works. One is Literature and Dogma, which came in 1873, where he defines religion as morality touched with emotion. Okay, so morality is there and emotion is there. The other important point that he never uses the word God in this work in the strict terms of God, in the strict terms of Jesus Christ. He uses this term in relation to poetry and its eloquence. And the third important point, that he rejected supernatural elements in religion. And the second important work is God and the Bible, which came in 1875, where he says that the story of the salvation of Jesus Christ is not true, and he made a very daring statement that it never really happened. Then yes, through Dover Beach, you can imagine the kind of situation that was prevalent at that point of time in English Empire. Okay, so everybody was confused, as you can see in the third line. Everybody was confused, and there is an imaginary of dark plain where ignorant armies are clashing. Okay, so by ignorant armies, you can refer to the people of the church the monarchs, okay, and the public itself, okay. So everybody is clashing, everybody is struggling, everybody is fighting, but how are they fighting? Ignorantly. They do not know why are they actually fighting, okay. So this was the situation. So he says that nothing but poetry can help people bring out from this kind of darkening situation, okay. So that's why he wrote the study of poetry. So the highlighted ones are some important points here. He said the future of poetry is immense, it is permanent, and it will stay longer and longer, okay. Then he said that again, the situation that he, or the image that he gave in Dover Beach, he said there is not a creed which is not shaken, not an accredited dogma which is not shown to be questionable. So everything is questionable, okay. Everything is shaken. So it is the situation of that everything is in disorder, okay. Even religion has materialized itself, okay. So the churches has become corrupt, okay. So nothing is there which can bring the humanity out of this problem. So he suggests that poetry can help, because for him, if you look at these points, for him, for poetry, the idea is everything. The rest is a word of illusion, okay. And now you can see this, the idea and emotion you can attach with his definition of religion. He says, what is religion? Morality touched with emotion, okay. So for poetry, he says idea is there, emotion is there, okay. So now because religion has become corrupt, now what can replace religion is the poetry, because it has everything which a religion has, okay. Now he says that poetry can fulfill its high function only if we keep a high standard for it. So this is important. Now he says that poetry can replace religion and it can save humanity. It will stay longer and longer, it is permanent. But so if you think that the function of poetry is this, or is to replace religion, then we must maintain high standard for it, okay. Only then it can fulfill its function, okay. No charlatanism, okay. What is charlatanism? False ideas, okay. Anybody who claims to have superficial knowledge or skill which actually he does not have, that person is a charlatan, okay. So charlatanism does not have any place in a poetry which is of high standard, or which can be replaced by the kind of poetry which can replace religion. In such kind of poetry there is no place for charlatanism. So he says that a criticism of life, poetry is a criticism of life under the conditions fixed for that criticism by the laws of poetic truth and poetic beauty. So he says that poetry must have poetic truth and it must have poetic beauty. So what do we mean by poetic truth? That it must have the standard set by, okay. It must have poetic beauty. It must have, again again he talks about the standards, okay. So by poetic truth and poetic beauty, he talks about, he relates these things with the high standards, okay. So this was the general introduction of the study of poetry. As I told you that this was the first essay of his second series of essays in criticism. Essays in criticism came in two series, one in 1865, with which he begins his literary 1865, and the second one in 1888. So this study of poetry is the first essay of 1888 volume. I'm in a little hurry. If you have any doubt at any point of time, you may ask. Okay. So this the study of poetry was originally published as the general introduction, ये important है, to T.H. Ward's anthology. Okay, and what was the name of that anthology? The English Poet. It was originally published as Introduction to T.H. Ward's anthology. Is that clear? So in this, he says that in the age of crumbling creeds, again the imagery of that Dover beach, okay, that everything is shaken, that the religion is materialized. Poetry will have to replace religion, that because he says only poetry, nothing else has the power to save humanity now. So he says we will turn to poetry to interpret life for us, to console us, to sustain us. So to interpret life for us, to console us, to sustain us. Now he says that if poetry is of high standard, it will interpret life, it will tell us what do we actually mean by life, okay, what is why do we exist on this earth, what is our job to do, right? It will console us in the state of depression or in the state of darkening situation, and it will sustain us, it will save us, because it can replace religion. Now he talks about the high standard that he was talking about. He says that if we want poetry to replace religion, if we want poetry to save humanity, okay, if we want poetry to interpret life for us, if we want poetry to sustain us, then we must distinguish the poetry which is good or of high standard and the poetry which is inferior. Okay? So for this he coins the term touchstone. For what? To differentiate poetry of high standard and that of low standard. What is genuine and what is false. Okay? What is good in poetry, what is bad in poetry. What kind of poetry can save us from this bad situation. Okay, for this he talks about touchstone method. So he says that, and to do this we must keep ourselves in the work of the acknowledged masters. Okay. He is talking about some ancient poets, okay, exemplifying their high seriousness and their superiority of diction and movement. Okay. So he talks about not only about that movement, idea and emotion, he talks about diction as well, what kind of diction one must use. Okay. So for this he says, for analyzing poetry in order to determine whether it is of high standard or not, he develops this touchstone method. Two important points about this touchstone method, that he borrows the idea from Longinus. So if you can remember Longinus, Longinus talks about the sublimity, and he says that a certain example of sublimity can please anyone regardless of habits, tastes or ages, and can please at all times. So sublimity कैसे achieve होती है? When it can please anybody, okay, regardless of habits, means हमारी habits कैसी हैं, आपकी habits कैसी हैं, it hardly matters. हमारा टेस्ट क्या है, हमारा इंटरेस्ट क्या है, इट हार्डली मैटर्स. हम किस टाइम में रह रहे हैं, ठीक है, हमारे बच्चों के टाइम क्या होंगे, तो इट इज़ फॉर ऑल टाइम. सो इफ अ पोएट्री कैन गिव दीज थिंग्स, दैट पोएट्री गिव्स sublimity. Okay, so from here he borrows this idea. Now in England, Addison was the first person who talks about this method, though he does not give the term touchstone, but he talks somewhat like this. Addison says he would have a man read classical works which have stood the test of time and place. Okay, which have stood the test of time and place. You see, Longinus also talks about time and place, and also those modern works which find high praise among the contemporaries. Okay, so he was the first one in England to talk about this kind of method, though the term originally was coined by Matthew Arnold. Please stop me wherever you think that I am moving fast. So for touchstone method, he has proposed passages from Homer, Shakespeare, Milton, and Dante. This can come in the examination many times. I mean, who he does not propose to take the passages from. Okay, so Homer, Shakespeare, Milton, and Dante. Then what is the mechanism? He talks about three things. Okay, he says that if you analyze a poetry from historical perspective, then it dominates the value judgment. Okay, so if it is her historical perspective, then history will dominate the judgment that you make. Then second thing, if you have a personal estimate, then your personal and cognitive biases, okay, these things will dominate your estimate. So he talks about real estimate, that whenever we analyze a poetry, we must follow the real estimate. Or what is real estimate? The unbiased and unprejudiced evaluation. I believe you know that he talked about disinterestedness. He coined the term disinterestedness. It is somewhat like willing suspension of disbelief as well. One thing about his disinterestedness is that you have to move from the practical world to the world of imagination. Okay, and then you have to keep yourself apart from any kind of ideology that you have in your mind if you want to evaluate poetry. Okay, so only then it can become unbiased and unprejudiced evaluation. Okay, so it can actually put a fine balance between historical context and innovation, or flair of the individual poet. So he does not recommend historical estimate, he does not recommend personal estimate. He talks about, or he recommends real estimate, which is unbiased or unprejudiced evaluation. Okay, and this real estimate can have a balance, or will maintain a balance between historical context and personal estimate. Here are some of the passages which he took for his touchstone method. One important point here, he says, I mean, this can be there in the examination. What is the length of the passage which he says that should be taken for analyzing poetry? Okay, so he says even a single line can serve as a best example for analyzing a poetry. Okay, so he takes Helen's words. ये आपको याद रखना पड़ेगा एग्जाम के लिए, ठीक है. Helen's words about her wounded brother, then Zeus addressing the horses of Peleus, and then Achilles' words to Priam, Dante's Ugolino's brave words, and Beatrice's loving words to Virgil. And then from non-classical writers, he talks about he takes passages from Henry IV, Henry's expostulation with sleep, wilt thou upon the high and giddy mast, from Hamlet, absent thee from felicity a while, and from Milton's Paradise Lost Book 1, care set on his faded cheek, and what is else not to be overcome. So sometimes, I mean, these things can also be asked in the examination. Okay, yes. Okay. Then he says that because their passages, he takes the passages from those four people: Homer, Shakespeare, Milton, and Dante. Okay, because of the following qualities, he says that the passages from these poets, they have the possession of very highest poetical quality. Second thing, they have characters of high quality. The third thing, that both substance and matter. They have both substance and matter, means form and content. They have style and manner. Okay, so the content is good and the style is good. Okay, so as we talked about, in some earlier slides, that he talks about both diction and he talks about idea. Okay, so in the passages that he selected, those passages have both good ideas and both good diction. By diction he means here style and manner. Okay, and then fourth thing, he said that these passages have high truth and high seriousness, and they are timeless and moving. Okay, timeless and moving, the idea of sublimity of Longinus, right? Okay, then here are some important points. He says that Chaucer, Dryden, Pope, Burns and Shelley fall short of Arnold's classic designation, who ultimately lacks the truth and high seriousness. एग्जाम्स में कई बार चौसर के बारे में पूछा गया है, लेकिन चौसर के अलावा ड्राइडन, पोप और बर्न्स एंड शेली भी हैं जो कहते हैं कि वो उनका जो क्लासिक डेजिग्नेशन है उसके अंदर नहीं आते हैं वो. ठीक है, पोइट्स लाइक शेक्सपियर, मिल्टन एंड ग्रे आर क्लासिक पोइट्स. ये याद रखना है, इनको बोलते हैं वो कि क्लासिक पोइट्स हैं, शेक्सपियर, मिल्टन एंड ग्रे. शेक्सपियर, मिल्टन एंड ग्रे, these three are classic poets, while Chaucer, Dryden, Pope and Burns are not classic. Okay. Ideal poets कौन है? होमर, सोफोक्लिस, डांटे, मिल्टन, गोथे एंड वर्ड्सवर्थ. वर्ड्सवर्थ के बारे में एक इम्पॉर्टेंट पॉइंट ये है कि उन्होंने फ्रंट रैंक में रखा तो था, लेकिन नॉट फॉर हिज पोइट्री. नॉट फॉर हिज पोइट्री, ये इम्पॉर्टेंट है. किसके लिए रखा था? बट बिकॉज ऑफ हिज क्रिटिसिज्म ऑफ लाइफ. इसकी वजह से वो फर्स्ट रैंक में आए थे. ओके, वर्ड्सवर्थ के बारे में उन्होंने लिखा, वर्ड्सवर्थ इवन प्रोफाउंड एज ही इज, yet so wanting in completeness and variety. He says he is in wanting in completeness and variety. Okay, so completeness is not there, variety is not there, still he is in the first rank. So what is the reason? Because of his criticism of life. ये याद रखना है आपको. The greatness of Wordsworth lies in his powerful application of the subject of ideas to man, nature and human life. So this he is of the first rank because of whatsoever he talks about man, nature and human life. Otherwise he does not have completeness, he does not have variety. And on Shelley, you have very famous line, beautiful but ineffectual angel, beating in the void his humorous wings in vain. So he heavily criticized Shelley actually. Okay, ineffectual means unproductive, he cannot produce anything, he is useless. In Shelley's poetry there is nothing other to extol than clouds and sunsets. So
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, please. Oh yeah. You seem to be right actually, if I can recall it, but please check it. Okay. And Coleridge also says something. Shelley also says something for Coleridge. He says he is a poet and philosopher wrecked in the midst of opium. Okay, so both of them criticized everyone. Now, if we talk about his estimate about some other things, so he says that romantic century or romantic poetry is provincial, and the literature of the romantic age lacks intellectual vigor. ये important है. ठीक है, कार्लिल को उन्होंने मोरल डिस्पैरडो बोला, रस्किन को एसेंट्रिक बोला, टेनिसन की मॉड को लेमेंटेबल प्रोडक्शन बोला, एंड स्विनबर्न को शूडो सेली. ये याद रखने पड़ेंगे. Okay. Now we'll talk about culture and anarchy. We are left with 10 minutes. Okay. Culture and Anarchy, it's a series of periodical essay. The complete name of it, an essay in political and social criticism. Culture and Anarchy, an essay in political and social criticism. So it was first published in Cornhill magazine 1867 or 1868 somewhere, and collected as a book in 1869. तो ये एक इम्पॉर्टेंट पॉइंट यहाँ पर ये है कि पहली बार इसका जो पब्लिकेशन हुआ था वो कॉर्नहिल मैगजीन में हुआ और एज ए बुक ये आया 1869 में. और प्रीफेस भी जब ये बुक के फॉर्म में आया, एट दैट टाइम द प्रीफेस वाज एडिड टू इट. देन ही रोट अ सीक्वल ऑफ दिस कल्चर एंड एनार्की which was heavily neglected by the audience, and the name of the sequel is Friendship's Garland, which came in 1871. And in this Culture and Anarchy, he attacked non-conformists. Who are non-conformists? Those who do not comply with the rules and regulations. Okay. So he contrasts culture, which he defines as the study of perfection. Culture क्या है? Study of perfection. With anarchy, the prevalent mood of England's then new democracy, which lacks standards and a sense of direction. Now you can relate it with those 3 lines of Dover Beach, where he says that everything is shaken, people are ignorantly clashing, people are ignorantly fighting, right? So he says that England's new democracy lacks standards and it does not have any direction. Okay. So in study of poetry, he says that if poetry can save humanity, okay, because poetry has the power to replace religion. Now here he says that since culture is the study of perfection, okay, so this can help in removing the anarchy. Okay. He has written a preface of this Culture and Anarchy, and in the preface he says, culture as the great help out of our present difficulties. Okay, and somewhat the same thing he has said about poetry also. Okay, culture being a pursuit of our total perfection. Ravi, are you around? Oh, Ravi is not there. I need to. Yes. So, culture, is a pursuit of our total perfection. Okay. So, if we want to move towards perfection, we have to think about the culture, and culture has the power to make us come out of this, ignorant situation. Culture can turn a stream of fresh and free thought. Okay. Then it has 6 chapters. One is Sweetness and Light, the other is Doing as One Likes, then Barbarian, Philistine and Populace. The 4th one is Hebraism and Hellenism. Then 5th one is from Latin, which is Poro unum est necessarium, which means but one thing is needful. And 6th one is our liberal practitioner. Okay. Then Sweetness and Light. Important point about Sweetness and Light is that it is the first chapter, and this phrase has been taken from the Battle of Books, which came in 1705 by Jonathan Swift. Okay, Swift. So from here he takes this phrase, and by sweetness and light he means pleasing and instructive. Sweetness is the beauty and light is the intelligence. Okay, so if you have beauty and if you have the intelligence, then you can please people, you can instruct people. Okay, and if this sweetness and light is there in any given culture, then the culture is a great culture and it can help people come out any kind of complex situation. Okay. So he says that pleasing and instructive, which in classical theory was considered to be the aim and justification of poetry. Now you can relate it with the study of poetry, where he says that poetry can replace religion. Okay, and when can it replace religion? When it has set standards, when it justifies itself. And what does it justify? That when it is pleasing and instructive, which he talks about culture. But if poetry has this kind of feature, if it has the high standards, then it can help humanity come out of complex situations. Okay. So as I told you earlier, that this is the title of the first section of his 1869 book, Culture and Anarchy. Okay. Now in Sweetness and Light, he talks about perfection, and for this perfection there are two requirements. One is an eagerness to learn based on seeing things as they really are. Okay. Now you can think in terms of ontological study. Okay. The existence, knowledge of existence, the things which they actually are. Okay. And the effort to ensure that the rest of society is constructed upon this knowledge and recognition. Okay. So seeing, I believe you remember ontological and epistemological studies. Okay. So if you are looking at the things, or if you have the knowledge of the things which they really are, as they really are, okay, that is ontological. And if now you are you are thinking about their application. Okay. If you are taking their taking the help of the things as they really are to make the society better, okay, to construct the society upon the knowledge of being, okay, then you are doing epistemological studies. So for perfection you must have both these things, ontological and then epistemological. So a society must have these two things. Okay. So looking at the things as they really are, and to ensure that the rest of the society is constructed upon the knowledge that is already there. Okay. And how you can practically apply all of these things. He says culture is never completed because perfection cannot be attained. Culture is always in flux and adaptable, but it is never completed because nobody can achieve perfection. Important. Okay. But you must have that sweetness and light, beauty and intelligence. Okay. Then second chapter, doing as one likes. It is a response essay where he says anarchy is the result of doing as one likes on the basis of the freedom to enjoy act rather than the consequences of that act. So now here he attacks the then British Empire, the then British government, or the corrupt churches. He says that people there are they are acting not thinking about what will be the result. Okay, whether it is it will bring a bad result or a good result, they are not thinking about it. They are just doing actions. Okay, so as the name suggests, doing as one like, जो जिसके मन में आ रहा है वो कर रहा है. ठीक है, people are not thinking about it. Okay, so British citizens having become too willing to trust in the machine of parliamentarian democracy. So people have people believe in that machinery. Machine किसको बोल रहे हैं ये? Parliamentarian democracy को. To solve problems created by the conflict of everybody doing as he likes again. Okay, so people are doing what they think good to be done, right? So, but he says that there are two important things that people must think and then act. Now he talks about three important constituents of a society: barbarian, Philistines, and populace. So barbarians are the privileged aristocratic society who have, ये याद रखना है, aristocratic class के लिए है, who have their lofty spirit, serenity, and distinguished manners, and but they are inaccessibility to ideas, which he talks in poetry also, which he talks in this culture and anarchy also. Okay, so these people do not think about ideas. They are privileged and they do whatsoever they want to do. Okay. Then Philistines, this term has been borrowed from German and it refers to the middle class. Now middle class has the energy, but they are self-satisfied. हमको इतनी सैलरी मिल रही, ठीक, हम इतने में ही काम चलाएंगे. ओके, so they have plenty of energy but insufficient for the sweetness and light. Okay, sweetness and light means that beauty and intelligence, because they do not think beyond that. उनको जितना काम मिला है, they act and then they feed themselves and then they sleep. And then you have populace. Okay, so populace is for working class. Okay, so working class is still raw and blind about the culture, about that pleasing aroma of a culture. Okay, it does not think about that. All right, so these three terms are important, especially barbarians, privileged aristocracy, and its inaccessibility to ideas. Philistine, the middle class but insufficient. Okay, and populace, working class, which is blind. Then he talks about Hebraism, and Hebraism is the spirit of the Bible, and Hellenism is the Greek spirit. Okay, in the third chapter he talks about this. So he says the uppermost idea with Hellenism is to see things as they really are, which he talks about in chapter 1 also. Okay, so Hellenism, what is Hellenism? To see things as they really are, and Hebraism is conduct and obedience. Now if you can see here, yes, what I was talking about, yes, doing as one likes. People are doing what they think that this is right. Okay, they are not applying any idea, any thinking on it. So he says that there are two things. One is Hellenism. Okay, so Hellenism is to see things as they really are, and Hebraism is conduct and obedience. So Hebraism, the Greek spirit tells you how you should do something, or whether you should do something or not. Okay, so it is related to religion. Okay, or the rules and regulation of a given culture, or you can say the law and order. Okay, if you do this, आपको पाप लगेगा, right? That sin. Okay, Hellenism considers that the body and its desires are an impediment to right thinking. ये important point है. Hebraism considers that the body and its desire are obstacle for right action. तो Hellenism कहता है कि thinking में कौन सा impediment है? Body and desire. ठीक है, और Hebraism कहता है कि आपके right action में कौन impediment है? Body and desire. तो ये Hebraism कहता है कि एक्शन में इम्पेडिमेंट है बॉडी एंड डिजायर, हेलेनिज्म कहता है थिंकिंग के लिए इम्पेडिमेंट है बॉडी एंड डिजायर. नाउ द गवर्निंग आइडिया ऑफ हेलेनिज्म इज स्पॉन्टेनिटी ऑफ कॉन्शियसनेस एंड हाउ कॉन्शियस यू आर फॉर द सोसाइटी यू आर लिविंग इन. Oh, somebody is waiting perhaps. I got, okay, nobody is here. All right. Now, yes, so Hebraism is the strictness of conscience. Okay, So one talks that you must Hellenism says you must think about the society you are living in, what are the good things, what are the bad things, and then before doing action, Hebraism says you must have the strictness of conscience. Your conscience will tell you what is good and what is bad, and only then you should act. Okay. Hellenism speaks of thinking clearly, seeing things in their essence and beauty. Okay. This is for Hellenism. And Hebraism speaks of becoming conscious of sin. Okay. So Hebraism conscious of sin, strictness of conscience. Okay. इनकी बारे में बात करता है. तो it says that this body and desire. Okay. So if you have wrong desires, you will do a wrong action. Okay. So it may lead towards to sin. Now the fourth chapter, porro unum est necessarium. So this is a Latin phrase which translates, but one thing is needed, or one thing is needful. Okay. All work and no play make Puritan Jack dull. By dull is meant not boring but incomplete. Okay. You see this. What is the idea here? Okay. All work and no play means he wants to say that that every time acting and acting, action and action, and no brooding over it, no thinking over it, will make the thing boring. So जो न्यू डेमोक्रेटिक गवर्नमेंट थी, इट वॉज नॉट थिंकिंग अबाउट द आइडियाज गिवन बाय द रिलीजन. ओके, बिकॉज रिलीजन भी मटेरियलाइज्ड हो चुका था. ठीक है. सो ये कहते हैं कि मतलब we must put ourselves in thinking as well. Okay. So the problem is that there is never just one needful things. ये important है. हमेशा ऐसा नहीं होता कि एक चीज की ही जरूरत हो. ठीक है. So you cannot be mechanical all the time in your approach. You need to give yourself, you need to put your ideas, to think whether something is going to be good or something is going to be bad. And the next chapter is our liberal practitioner. So he says an attempt, this is, this last chapter is least important, and it is an attempt to apply the theoretic constructs outlined previously. तो इसके पहले के चैप्टर्स में जो भी थियोरेटिकल अंडरस्टैंडिंग उन्होंने डेवलप की है, तो उसको कैसे पॉलिटिकल एंड रिलीजियस इवेंट्स में उसको कैसे अप्लाई कर सकते हैं. ठीक है, उसके बारे में बात करता है. और लेकिन इसमें ये दो इम्पॉर्टेंट बातें हैं. इंग्लैंड में ये दो बिल थे. एक ये बिल था रियल एस्टेट इंटेस्टेसी बिल, एंड सेकंड था द लिबरेशन सोसाइटी बिल. इनका रेफरेंस है इस चैप्टर में. ये एक बार एग्जाम में पूछा गया था. देन करेक्टर्स के बारे में भी आई डोंट रिमेंबर विच एग्जाम, उसमें पूछा गया था विच अमंग द फॉलोइंग इज नॉट ए करेक्टर in culture and anarchy. So these three characters are there in this work. ये क्योंकि अब ये critical work है, तो people generally do not think about characterization. Okay, so there are three characters. One is Bishop Wilson. So ये विल्सन की बुक थी जिसका नाम है ये बुक थी मैक्सिम्स ऑफ पाइटी एंड क्रिश्चियनिटी. तो इसके बारे में, इसके रेफरेंस में वो बिशप विल्सन की बात करते हैं और ये बताते हैं कि हाउ दिस टेक्स्ट इन्फॉर्म्स मच ऑफ व्हाट इज टू कम. आगे दुनिया में क्या होने वाला है इसकी बात करते हैं. वो इस बुक में बात होती है. वो इस वजह से बिशप विल्सन का रेफरेंस है. सेकंड मिस्टर ब्राइट, ये रिप्रेजेंटेटिव है फिलिस्तीनिज्म के ऑफ द मिडिल क्लास. ठीक है. एंड द थर्ड वन इज फ्रेडरिक हैरिसन, portrays as too much the supporter of the anti culture machinery. ठीक है. तो इनको एंटी कल्चर मशीनरी के सपोर्टर के बारे में के फॉर्म में देखा गया है. सो देयर आर थ्री कैरेक्टर. आई रिपीट इट: बिशप विल्सन, मिस्टर ब्राइट एंड फ्रेडरिक हैरिसन. थैंक यू. इफ यू हैव एनी क्वेश्चन यू कैन आस्क. आई डिड इट वेरी. oh yes.
Sir, thank you, sir.
ओह वेलकम।
सर सर पीपीटी शेयर कर दीजिएगा आप ग्रुप में।
मैं वीडियो शेयर कर दूंगा बेटा, कल कर दूंगा लेकिन, है ना।